Now available in paperback. Those who refuse the gift of eternal life are condemned to wander in the darkness of eternal night. Get your copy of Eternal Night at online booksellers today. One of my viewers sent me the first two issues of the black sci-fi saga Marassa. Now, when I looked at the publisher of this book, I started to become concerned because your Marassa is published by Evoluizine Publishing, and Evoluizine Publishing, they have serious issues as related to rushing books out before they're not ready. Now, I had been picking up their LaFay miniseries, and that series started out with a very promising premise before it fell apart in the third issue. And like LaFay, your Marassa starts out with a very promising premise. Unfortunately, there are problems with the structure of the writing and the whole development of the characters that keep this book from being as great as it possibly could. Now, the back of the Marassa book says that Princess Mara is a retired space pirate who gave up her life to raise a family. But what happens when her charmingly thieving, troublemaking twin brother Saw visits her with the map to her parents' lost treasure, an adventure that garners them the attention of other space pirates, bounty hunters, humanoid snake doctors, cosmic voodoo, and breathing wooden mask babies. Now, when you look at this comic and you see the cover of the first issue, you don't really get to see the princess as the lead character. And that's a major red flag when you're going out here and saying, oh, the princess is the main character, but she's not front and center on the cover. That's something that a good editor would pull a creator to the side and say, look, if you're going to make this book about this female lead, she needs to be front and center on the book. You have everybody on the cover but the princess, and that really is not a good, strong selling point. And as the book opens up, we are shown an establishing shot of a faraway area, a guy carrying somebody in a bag, and then them being attacked. So we don't get to see the main character that we're told is on the back of the book first. We get to see somebody else, and that prevents us from getting a critical question answered. Who is the main character? What do they want? And why should we care? Because when I first read this book, I saw this whole sequence with this Saw character, and I thought he was going to be the main character. Now, they show the Saw character. He's being trailed by this bounty hunter, and this whole sequence is a very intriguing one that really reminds me of something like Star Wars. And as I'm reading the comic, I'm very intrigued to find out how this Saw character wound up not surviving this whole sequence, and I was hoping to get some answers as related to it. Now, after we get this intriguing sequence where he's attacked, and then this bundle he's taking is being carried into the ship, we then go into a nice sequence that really reminds me of Tatooine on Star Wars. When I was reading these pages of seeing this whole ship and then this bounty hunter, I was really getting really excited for it, because this whole sequence was reminding me a lot of Tatooine on Star Wars, and it was also reminding me somewhat of One Piece. And as this ship is floating above everything and this big auction's going on, we get this very dashing character, this kind of space pirate who kind of reminds me of Han Solo. And I'm really getting intrigued about him stealing this map, which is supposed to show you this road to this treasure. Again, very interesting stuff. But the big problem with this whole book is that it doesn't really have good structure as related to storytelling, and it doesn't have good pacing. So we get introduced to the Saw character, and we see him being this dashing and debonair pirate, kind of again like Han Solo, having a ship similar to a mix of the Battlestar Galactica ship and the Millennium Falcon and Luke's X-Wing. So a lot of promising ideas as related to this character, and I would have wanted to see him more, but the book really, again, the structural problems are really the big issue. Now, we've gone through, let me see how many pages here before we meet the so-called main character. We go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 pages before we meet Princess Mara. And that's a big problem when you're an independent publisher, because you only get one chance at a first impression. Now, I know the creator, what they wanted to do here was try to build the world with these characters, similar to what they were trying to do with Star Wars, where we saw Princess Leia, we saw Darth Vader, and then eventually we got to Luke Skywalker. But in the comic book medium, you don't really have time to go out here and take all of your pages to set stuff up, because the longer you take to set up, the faster the reader's going to walk away, because you want the reader to care about what's going on. And it was very hard to care about much here because of the setups and the pacing. And that's one of the things that really hampers this book. I really like a lot of the visual designs as related to the characters. I like a lot of the concepts as related to the premise, but the story could be a little bit better structured, and we really do need a lot better character development, because by the time we get to this point where the main heroine is supposed to be in the book, this Mara, we're already halfway in and we barely get to know anyone. I mean, we got to know the Saw character and her being married to this rich guy and living very well and walking away from the pirate's life, and we get some intriguing ideas as related to this whole going back for the family treasure, but the characters don't really get enough development overall, and that's one of the other big problems with this book. I mean, I really like the art, I really like the premise, and I really like the visuals here, but the big problem is that we really don't really get to know anyone the way we should, because by the time we get into the book, then all of a sudden, as we're getting to know these characters and this whole quest for this treasure, the Saw character gets killed. And sadly, when the Saw character gets killed, that's when the story starts to really fall apart. Now, I don't want to give away too much of issue number 1, but I found it very jarring that issue number 1 was looking like 48 pages, and issue number 2 wasn't looking as full as issue number 1. Now, after the Saw character winds up getting killed, then we go into a completely different character, and that's really jarring for a reader. I mean, you introduce this dashing scoundrel of a pirate, then you kill him, and then we are introduced to another character, and then we're supposed to follow that character. I mean, when you're doing stories, you really want to keep people following one lead character as you're entering a world, because when you're building a world, you really want to have that one character coming into that world with a sense of awe and wonder, because as we're watching this character come into this world, we're learning about the world with him. But we get this new character who is supposedly his wife, and then we get introduced to other female characters, but the action and adventure that we were having as related to space, we're not really taken into. It's like supposedly the death of the Saw character is supposed to lead to Mara going on into space as related to this whole quest for the treasure, and it's supposed to affect his girlfriend as well. but I'm just not really seeing how everything comes together as related to storytelling. I mean, I liked the fantasy here as related to the story. I liked the richness of the world here that was presented in Marassa, but there was a big problem with the structure of the storytelling. I mean, when you're doing comic books, you really want to make sure you have one character as the hero and that hero going on a hero's journey. And it's hard to really get into a book when you see the character who's supposed to be the hero not featured on the first page, because if they're not on the first page, then the reader isn't going to care. And if the reader doesn't see the hero, they're going to be confused. Because I remember I read this book about 3-4 times before I went out here to record this video, and I tried to figure out who was the hero of this story. And it was really sad that the only way I could find out is on the back of the book. When you're reading a comic, nobody's going to look at the back of the comic. They'll look at the back of a graphic novel. They'll look at the back of a novel. But we need to see this hero, and we need to see why we need to care about this hero. If they're a major character, they need to be on the front cover, and they need to be the one in action on the cover. I see everybody but Mara on the book, and everybody is more compelling than Mara in the book. And you don't want your hero to be passive in the story. No, you want your hero to be active in the story, and you want your hero to be front and center. And that was one of the problems I had with Marassa as a book. They were just, again, it's a great and fantastic world, but we need the right hero front and center. And again, this is a problem I've seen with many Evaluizine books I have picked up, like LaFay previously, which I just stopped doing reviews of that book. I bought all 5 issues of that book digitally on Kickstarter, and the book fell apart in the 3rd issue, and I just said I'm just going to leave it alone, because the book it's just the storytelling and the structure of the storytelling is just not there. Now, this book has, again, structural issues because it doesn't introduce that main character early on. I mean, we meet the Saw character, and he's a very intriguing character. He's got a great story, but sadly, his story ends in the 1st issue, and we needed to have his story be the primary focus of things, because he was the one who was having all of the action and adventure, and he was the one looking like somebody interesting, and we were entering this world, and he reminded me a lot of, again, Han Solo, the pirate who leads One Piece. I mean, he reminded me so much, and he had a little African guy made of wood who was his son. Very interesting stuff here, and then it just winds up falling apart in the middle of this whole 1st issue. The world where we're getting to know this guy ends, and it just, again, very disappointing. And then we get into the 2nd issue, we get into Saw's death, and then we get into his wife, and again, and then we get into Mara grieving Saw, but we don't really get into a story that makes us care about any of the characters, because there's no lead character, and when there's no lead character, the story becomes really hard to follow. I really wanted to go out here and recommend the Marassa book that was previously on Kickstarter. I like a lot of the ideas here that are presented, but as related to the concept and the premise, but the writers really have to go take some courses or read something about comic book storytelling and screenwriting, because the structure here is the big problem with these books, and the structural issues here as related to this story are the thing that really impede it from being a truly great story. What's presented here could be an epic like Star Wars, and it could be easily a great manga like One Piece, but you need good writing to be able to lay out that world. and you have to understand how characters work in a world when you're doing epic storytelling. You have to understand that every character that you introduce is somebody we care about, and you just can't kill off a character that we get to know early in a book and then make a second issue where we're supposed to try to figure out what's going on afterward. That's very jarring and confusing for a reader, and then it becomes more confusing when I read the back of the book. And you really, again, want to watch out for these kind of things, because it can lead to you going from making a major first impression on a reader. Because when I read this first issue of Marassa, I was really impressed. I was really into the story until the last few pages. Then I read the second issue, and I wound up becoming a bit more confused. And it just, again, it's all about how you lay out your story, how you structure your plot points. And I would definitely recommend that the writer of this comic definitely go and pick up Sid Field's screenplay and Robert McKee's story and learn a little bit about storytelling in pictures, because when you're doing storytelling in comics, you have to really watch how you sequence your art, your script, and you have to really watch how you transition from scene to scene. That was another issue that I had with this book, because the transitions are not really organic. I mean, when you're transitioning from one big sequence like this to another sequence, it's very jarring from us to go from a guy on one planet to another planet a couple months later, and then us going from one sequence to another sequence. It's just very jarring, and you have to watch how you transition your scenes. So there's a lot of, this book again has great ideas, but there's really serious issues as related to execution. I would love to see a Marassa as a premise, but I believe it just needs to be reworked a bit and polished a bit as related to the script. And with a good script, this could possibly be a very promising saga if the writers just try to get stuff together, because this could have been, again, a really great comic, but it just needed some time to go out here and polish stuff. And that's a big problem, again, with a lot of Evelyn books, is that they don't really take the time to polish their stories as related to editorial. They don't really take enough time to go out here and really take a minute to edit some of the scenes down, develop the characters a little bit better. They really have to work on their editorial, because they have a lot of great ideas out of Evelyn, like LaFay and Marassa, but what messes them up is they really don't understand how to structure their storytelling to create really compelling stories out of their great premises. Now, my first comic, Esteem No Good Deed, is available on Kindle for 99 cents, and you can pick up that comic on Kindle for under $1. And my next upcoming comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, has the first 3 acts of the art complete, and it will be available as soon as Antonio Balderi, the artist, finishes with the final 5 pages and the cover. So until then, you can pick up some of my action-packed African-American fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, such as the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find those books on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more comic review videos, you can donate to my Cash App, my Patreon, or my PayPal by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Bride of Dracula, The Goddess Next Door, and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire in this action-packed ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today.